December 26, 1805, The Times, Charleston, South Carolina. For the Times, on Witchcraft. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Exodus 22:18. The various ways employed to discover a witch are so curious as to require a recital. The means to discover them were numerous. One was to weigh the criminal against the church Bible, which, if she was guilty, would preponderate. Another by making her attempt to say the Lord's Prayer. This no witch was able to repeat entirely, but would omit some part or sentence thereof. Teats, through which the imps sucked, were indubitable marks of a witch. These were always raw, and also insensible, and, if squeezed, sometimes yielded a drop of blood. A witch, also it was held, could not weep more than 3 tears, and that only out of her left eye. Want of tears was good proof of a witch, and many poor creatures were convicted on that single circumstance alone. They discovered a witch by swimming her. This was performed in the following manner. She was stripped naked and cross-bound, the right thumb to the left toe, the left thumb to the right toe. Then she was thrown into the river, in which, if guilty, she would not sink, but if innocent, she would sink, for, having renounced by her compact with the devil the benefit of the water of baptism, that element renounced her. This mode of trial, by the by, was very unjust, for the unfortunate woman must perish either way. If she sunk and was drowned, she was innocent. If she did not sink, she was guilty, and immediately burnt. Sometimes they burnt her house, supposing that the fire would compel her imp to come out. At other times the animal bewitched was slain, which they believed would force her to confess. They likewise tried her by the stool. The supposed witch was placed in the middle of a room on a stool or table, cross-legged, or in some such uneasy posture. They then bound her with cords and kept her in that situation for 24 hours. Within that space they supposed her imp would come. They therefore made a hole in the door to let it in. They set several persons to keep watch and to sweep the room. If they discovered any fly, spider, or bug and tried to kill it, and it escaped, it was surely her imp. The witch was likewise shaved all over her body to prevent magical incantations. Flagellations were not spared, as this discipline was deemed highly proper to drive out the imp. Purgations and antispasmodics were given her, and frequently a plaster of asafoetida was placed on her left breast, because they conceived the preposterous smell of this medicine would infallibly drive out the imp. It was remarked that witches always convened on Fridays. If guilty, they were punished as heretics by the writ de heretico cumbrando. Witches were able to assume the shape of any animals which suited their convenience, but although they could change into whatever animal they pleased, yet, says Reginald Scott in his book entitled Discoveries of Witchcraft, they would be still without a tail. The persons pitched upon for witches were generally old, superannuated women who lived in a wretched hut in some obscure village, and whom misery had worn to the bones. I cannot give a better idea of the deformity, ugliness, and infernal caricatura of a witch than in the words of Otway. In a close lane, as I pursued my journey, I spied a wrinkled hag, with age grown double, picking dry sticks and mumbling to herself. Her eyes with scalding rheum were galled and red. Cold palsy shook her head. Her hands seemed withered, and on her crooked shoulders she had wrapped the tattered remains of an old striped hanging, which served to keep her carcass from the cold. So there was nothing of a piece about her. Her lower weeds were all o'er crossly patched with different colored rags, black, red, white, yellow, and seemed to speak variety of wretchedness. The devil, in consideration of the compact with his favorites, bestowed upon them various prerogatives. They had an unlimited command over the elements, as Hollingshed testifies, and as Summers, in a poem written Anno Domini 1600 called the last will and testament also beareth witness. In Ireland and Denmark both, witches, for gold, will fell a man, a wind, which in the corner of a napkin wrapped, shall blow him safe unto what coast he will. They were supposed not only to have this command over the elements, but also possessed the faculty of foresight or divination, and could, by magical incantations, call up the ghosts of persons long since dead, to reveal the secrets of futurity. This qualification was of much use to them, as thousands came to consult them on the hidden decrees of fate. They have, likewise, the command over their enemies, and woe unto that man who should fall under their displeasure. His cattle, his crops, his children, and even his own person were in imminent danger of destruction. Nothing could protect one from the effects of their anger. No distance was a security, as Reginald Scott, the author above quoted, says that witches could ride through the air on a broomstick, or could sail in an eggshell, a mussel, or cockleshell, through and under the tempestuous ocean. Children who had plagued them were bewitched in such a manner that they spit pins for several days. They also frequently gave the maids the nightmare. They could take horses out of the stable and ride them all night on their secret expeditions. The best way to prevent witches from entering your house was by laying 2 sticks crossways, or nailing a horseshoe over the door. This custom of nailing a horseshoe over the door is practiced even at this day, and you will scarce ever see a house in the country at the northward but has a horseshoe over the door, or a vessel but has one nailed to the mast to prevent storms. These witches became so dangerous in England that the written agimote, or literally translated, the Council of Wifemen, or as it is now called, the Imperial Parliament, were obliged to pass a law in the 33rd year of Henry VIII, to the following effect: all persons invoking any evil spirit, or consulting, feeding, or rewarding any evil spirit, or consulting or convening with, entertaining, employing, feeding, or rewarding any evil spirit, or taking dead bodies from their graves, to be used in any witchcraft, charm, sorcery, or enchantment, or killing or hurting any person by such infernal arts, should be guilty of felony, without benefit of clergy, and suffer death. Laws similar to the above were enacted in almost every kingdom of Europe, in consequence of which great numbers of old women lost their lives. Indeed, we are assured by a very learned and correct author that no less than 100,000 persons were tried, convicted, and executed for the crime of witchcraft from the 10th to the 17th century in different parts of Europe. Numbers were burnt in Scotland so late as 1606, others in France about the same period. The following example of the blind credulity of the people of those times, the sanguinary laws that were made, and the manner in which persons were convicted of witchcraft, is too striking to be passed over in silence. In the year 1652, a countrywoman named Michelle Chaudron of the little territory of Genoa met the devil in her way from the city. The devil gave her a kiss, received her homage, and imprinted upon her upper lip and on her right breast the mark which he is wont to bestow upon his favorites. The seal of the devil is a little sign upon the skin, which renders it insensible, as we are assured by all the demonographical civilians of those times. The devil ordered Michelle Chaudron to bewitch 2 young girls. She obeyed her master punctually. The parents of the 2 girls accused her of dealing with the devil. The girls, being confronted with the criminal, declared that they felt a continual pricking in some parts of their bodies and that they were possessed. Physicians were called, at least men that passed for physicians in those days. They visited the girls. They sought for the seal of the devil on Michelle, which seal is called in the verbal process the satanical mark. Into one of these marks they plunged a long needle, which was already no small torture. Blood issued from the wound, and Michelle testified by her cries that the part was not insensible. The judges, not finding sufficient proof that Michelle Chaudron was a witch, ordered her to be tortured, which infallibly produced the proof wanted. The poor wretch, overcome by torment, confessed at last everything desired. The physician sought again for the satanical mark and found it in a little black spot on one of her thighs. Into this they plunged their needle. The poor creature, exhausted and almost expiring with the pain of the torture, was insensible to the needle and did not cry out. She was instantly condemned to be burnt. But the world beginning at this time to be a little more civilized, she was previously strangled. The author of the history of Gustavus Adolphus saw 2 witches hung in Austria. In the time of James I, witchcraft was currently believed, and that great and sapient king himself wrote a book called Demonology, which proved to a demonstration the existence of witches. And even so late as the year 1692 in the New England states, the rage of witchcraft was so violent that no age or sex, no rank or condition were free from the imputation of this crime. Even dumb beasts were supposed guilty of nefarious practices, and a dog was accused of throwing persons into fits by looking at them. From the preceding facts collected from various authors, what conclusions ought to be drawn? Shall we say with Lord Bacon that witches do exist? Or shall we deny with the skeptic their existence altogether? The proper conclusion, it appears to me, is to believe with the pious Addison, that although we cannot forbear thinking that there is such an intercourse between evil spirits as that which we express by the name witchcraft, yet when we reflect at the same time upon the many impositions and delusions of this nature, which have been detected in all ages, we must suspend our belief until we have more certain accounts than any which have yet come to our knowledge.